Yeah, so I'd like to start off with talking about, I guess, your childhood, and yeah, just growing up, where you grew up, and like your family, if you're comfortable talking about it.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny, I was writing answers for an interview earlier this morning and they were asking about my childhood specifically because I feel like so much of our childhoods are the foundation upon which a lot of our stories and writings come from. And
Yeah,
I think that's certainly true for me. I grew up in a very small, isolated town in the northwest corner of Connecticut. So quintessential New England, beautiful countryside. Like I said, very isolated, very rural, um, not easily accessible, kind of like forgotten about in
yeah,
this quiet little corner, but just beautiful and stunning countryside. The thing that was difficult growing up was that I knew I was very different, and I
mhm,
knew that I was queer from a very young age, and knowing that and realizing that at such a young age, it puts you kind of as an outsider in such a small, insulated community.
mm,
Um, you recognize your differences, and in fact,
yeah,
other children recognize your differences before you even know about them.
yeah,
Because children are very perceptive, they're very insightful, and they can see when someone is different.
mm,
Um, and yeah, I grew up, I had very loving, supportive parents, thankfully, who were always accepting of me, always encouraging me to create and to be who I wanted to I knew from a early age that I wanted to be a writer.
yeah,
Um, but from that came a little bit of darkness in that I was so dedicated to my art, was so dedicated to my writing that I feel like I missed out on a lot of like natural childhood things. I was so focused on one thing in particular that I kind of lacked a normal
mm.
upbringing in a lot of ways.
And
And like I,
what age was this when you were like being obsessive?
oh, it was definitely like as early as like 10 or 11.
Ah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, that's when I really started getting serious about writing.
yeah,
Reading Agatha Christie was a favorite of mine,
yeah,
and I read like The Monkey's Paw
yeah,
and
wow,
classic
yeah, yeah,
horror mystery fiction. Um, and that put me, as I said, like as kind of an outsider because I was interested in things that other children just weren't interested
yeah, yeah,
in.
yeah.
So not only was I obviously queer from a very young age,
Mm,
I had very queer interests, and I was just very, very different. So with that came a lot of scrutiny, came a lot of bullying,
mm,
a lot of unpleasant memories from childhood, just the cruelty of other children,
yeah.
which was unfortunate, but that's unfortunately the way it goes.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. Did your kind of move at that age of 10 to maybe being a bit more, I guess, a bit more insular and focusing on something that made you feel good, was that a kind of direct consequence of feeling different? Did you retreat, or was it just a kind of a more of a natural thing?
I think I did retreat in a lot of ways. There's fight or flight in these
Yeah,
situations, and I definitely flee in those
yeah.
situations. I'm someone who retreats. I go back like into myself. I kind of like tuck myself away where I can't be hurt. And I feel like maybe gravitating toward that kind of fiction, like mystery, thriller,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
horror, I found a little bit of comfort.
Mm,
Um, so yeah, I think it was a good thing. I look back on those experiences and I'm in a way kind of pleased, like happy
yeah.
that that happened because maybe if it didn't happen, I wouldn't have fallen in love with
Mm,
literature the way I did. And I actually, from a really early age, I was very interested in theater as well. I was
yeah.
really interested in like Broadway plays and musicals. And that was another, way for me to stand out from the crowd
Yeah,
where
yeah,
I
yeah.
I wasn't like other boys who,
Mm,
played football or soccer or whatever. Like I was always in the library. I was always reading, always reading about literature, about plays, about film. And for a long time, I really thought I wanted to be a playwright. I thought I wanted to write plays, write for the stage.
Yeah.
Um, and that in and of itself is, quite a career. And I didn't really have like the necessary connection. So much of theater is like who you
Yeah,
know,
it's
and
extroverted, isn't it? Yeah.
it's very
Yeah.
extroverted, and
Yeah.
I'm just not. I'm an introvert by nature.
Yeah.
So for me, it felt more comfortable to write fiction. So from there, I kind of really developed my skill set as a writer, like as an author. I started reading Stephen King, Michael McDowell, Robert R. McCammon, and from there, I learned about other authors that were really interesting or I found captivating. And from there, I discovered like authors like Clive Barker
Yeah.
and Poppy Z. Bright
Mm.
and Kathy Koja.
Love
Um,
culture. Yeah. I
yeah, I
love the
mean,
cipher. The cipher. When I read that, I was like, I've never read anything like this. It's
yeah, it's
it's
so
so
singular.
it
It's so
is
singular.
it's surrealist and trippy, but there's that this kind of like brutal logic to it as well. It's like really kind of I don't know, it's just such I just felt like a world I'd never been in before, you know.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean,
Yeah.
Koja's work is just unparalleled, and
Yeah.
love her writing so much, and her as a person, she's just brilliant to be around as
I bet.
well.
I bet.
But yeah, I mean, Clive Barker was a huge moment for me, a very seminal moment in
Mm.
that it opened like my my brain to new possibilities in fiction.
Yeah.
I previously I was reading plays by like Tennessee Williams and Edward Albee and Arthur Miller,
Yeah.
and they were beautiful and they were
Yes.
wonderful to read, but they didn't like stretch my imagination the way that Clive Barker did.
Yeah.
And Clive Barker's prose and the way he tested the limits of what you could do in horror fiction,
Mm.
it was something I hadn't really seen ever before. And from there, it that opened a world in and of itself into like the splatterpunk genre,
Yeah.
where I really found myself completely transfixed by these authors like David J. Shaw, John Skipp and Craig Spector,
Yeah.
Richard Lehman. I mean, I the list could go on and on and on, but I mean, there were so many authors that I found myself completely mesmerized by, and it was really Barker that like was the catalyst for that.
Yeah.
So I'm very grateful that I was able to discover him at such a young age. And, Poppy Z. Bright, another one, and now Billy Martin,
Yeah.
an amazing, amazing author. But I found like such solace in those works of brutality. I found such
Mm.
comfort, which I know sounds really strange, but
No. Well.
to find literature that had openly queer characters
Mm.
doing unspeakable and monstrous things to one another, it felt really validating in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I felt seen because I for so long felt vile and monstrous,
Yeah.
and to see that reflected in literature and to see writers openly writing and discussing it,
Yeah.
uh, it made me feel like less of a freak.
I totally get it. And I think that there is this thing about that thing you just described about feeling monstrous. And I think it's that war within yourself when you're different of being both a victim and a monster at the same time. You feel grotesque, but also
Yes.
you part of you knows that you can't help it. And that's just who
Right.
you are. And I wanted to just go back and ask, like, how, like with you, because obviously, you discovered like Clive Barker and very queer coded horror. But when you were younger, how did you discover queer avenues for yourself? Like, did you seek it out? Were your parents like helping you find that as well? Or was there someone else? Were you literally like the only kind of queer kid around?
I definitely wasn't the only queer kid around. There were other LGBTQ plus students in my school system. There were others like in my community, but everything felt so isolated because
Mm,
I grew up, just to give you more context, like
yeah.
I grew up on like 60 acres worth of property.
Wow.
And it was like on top of a mountain in this town in Connecticut. So it was beautiful.
Yeah, it sounds it.
It was like the perfect space for any writer to live, to just be left alone and to write and to read constantly. It was idyllic.
Wow.
Um, but that said, it was so isolating. And the internet had just kind of
Yeah.
come around at that time. So a lot of what I did was exploration online.
Yeah.
Whether it was like chat rooms or pornography, like it
Yeah.
was all based online. It wasn't anything else like in community, like in
No.
person, or I was too ashamed. I was
Yeah.
too filled with self-doubt and anxiety about, which is so unfounded, but I was so worried about like what my parents would think of me.
Mm.
Um, I was so worried about what the community at large would think of me. And it was so ridiculous for me to be anxious about that because when I eventually did come out, everyone was so supportive and so kind,
Yeah.
at least like in my circle.
Yeah.
There were, of course, others around who were less than welcoming,
Yeah.
but that's to be expected, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of what I explored was all online. So like it was the Wild West online at that time. Like
Yeah.
things weren't really governed that well. You know, chat rooms, it was kind of like anything goes. And I mean, that was a primary influence for why I wrote Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke.
Yeah.
You know, my experiences in those chat rooms and you know, who the hell are you talking to on the other end of the computer? You know, you don't know.
Yeah.
But like that desire for connection and to reach out and like connect with another human being felt so real to me and so
Yeah.
personal that I knew I had to write about it eventually. And I didn't know what form it would take, but it eventually took the form of that novella. Um, but yeah, I think a lot of my early exposure to queer content and queer like role models or figures maybe wasn't the healthiest
Yeah.
because a lot of it was just random people on chat rooms
Yeah.
or you know the perfect male specimens in
Yeah. Yeah.
gay porn. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it wasn't like real tangible human connection. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was a bit more surface and not as emotionally nourishing as
Yeah.
I guess that's the thing about community. Although, I love the online community, and I think now it's evolved and matured in a way where you can have quite meaningful and emotional connections. But I think that, especially as someone growing up and as a child growing into it through puberty, a teenager, like you're driven by desires that you don't really understand yourself, and that brings
Exactly.
shame. But I think everyone in a way goes through a version of what went through.
Yeah.
Regardless of sexuality, I think we all kind of have those bits where we're like, I was looking for something and it felt, but it probably wasn't as meaningful as it could have been. But it doesn't matter because
Yeah.
it's a rite of passage you have to go through. And actually, I want to pick you up on the internet stuff because, like you said, that novella is, and it's not. I think it comes up in quite a few of your works, like the internet. And I was wondering, like specifically with loneliness and the internet, like we were just saying, like it's that's, I mean, I definitely discovering the internet was like, oh my god, I can actually find people who are interested in the things that I'm interested in because like I don't know anyone. And like, what is it like, what did like feeling isolated, you've described this community, the place that you lived, as being a very beautiful, idyllic, but way quite away from city and all of that stuff. How did like your loneliness, if it's not too bleak a question, kind of manifest like psychologically for you?
Definitely like reaching out to people who I probably shouldn't have been reaching
Oh
out
right,
to.
yeah, 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 yeah,
You know, like somewhat similar. I mean, not entirely similar to what happens in some of
yeah,
my books,
yeah.
but I think loneliness creates desperation in a lot of people
Mm,
and causes people to act irrationally and make decisions that they normally wouldn't make those decisions if they were operating in a healthier mindset.
yeah,
Um, I think loneliness is a silent killer in a lot of ways. I think it can destroy us. And make us turn in on ourselves and kind of like self-immolate.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the internet, while it's a wonderful tool,
Yeah.
I grew up with the internet. I grew up with having answers to questions just at the tip of my fingers. And the internet has brought amazing things into my life. Like I wouldn't have a career if it weren't for the
Yeah.
internet.
Yeah.
Um, I am totally I'm very grateful to the internet and all it can do for authors and marginalized people looking for community. But in the
Yeah.
same respect, I feel like the internet is incredibly dangerous as
Mm,
well.
mm,
I feel like it's a place where if you go into it unchecked with all of these
mm.
desperate urges and longings, and maybe you're not as mentally fit as you can be. I think it's a place where you can like eat yourself alive in a lot of ways.
Mm. Oh, I definitely agree with that. I think so basically the context for me is like I grew up in where my family didn't let me have access to the internet until I was literally like 15. Like I wasn't allowed a phone. I wasn't allowed to engage in popular culture at all. But like in a similar way, like that desperation that you're talking about, the loneliness that I have was really like I always gravitated towards things like horror, things which kind of were like metal, like things which kind of and I wasn't even allowed to really engage with those things, but I just knew, you go to a library or whatever, the record shop, and you're like, oh, I want to go and check out that stuff. And I think so when I came to the internet, I was really hungry for information and for people and connection. But I think that I kind of like what you're saying, I maybe had lived enough to kind of also know and respect how awesome and powerful it was and like that it felt dangerous when I was using it. I wasn't just like a kid just kind of going onto it and going, whoa, I can do anything I want. Like I was already had
Mhm.
that kind of sense of all right, this feels a bit dangerous. So I completely understand where you're coming from. And let's then just like split off into because as you said, like the internet is a fantastic thing for people who are marginalized who want to connect, especially writers. Like I know that Amazon gets a lot of hate, but when you think of Kindle print on demand and like what that has done, it's like that's an incredible thing. And when you were writing, you writing from the age of 10 or probably before. And you, what point did you start going? I think I might want to show this to other people.
I never had a hang up about showing my art to other people. I
Okay.
was always very interested in hearing what other people thought of what I created. I was involved in a lot of like community theater growing up, and they produced like one of my plays at a really young age.
Oh.
Um, and yeah, I was always interested in what other people thought of what I created, and to that end, I think it provided me a level of confidence to go out and submit my work to independent presses and uh, literary journals, magazines, because some writers I know they get very precious about what they create. They get like maybe a little bit
Mm.
more self-conscious, self or more hesitant to give it out.
Yeah, yeah.
I I feel that anxiety. I understand that anxiety, but to me, there's so much excitement and there's so much joy in passing a finished creative project over to someone else and just hearing what they have to say about it after they sort of digest what they've read.
Yeah.
I love that discussion. I love going to a reader and, having a dialogue about the book in question. I think that's really fascinating. And in a lot of ways, I learn about myself and my writing
Yeah.
through other readers,
Yeah.
through people consuming my work and telling me, "Oh, well, this is what I thought of when I read this part," or "Did you mean this when you wrote this particular section?"
Yeah.
This just happened to me the other day. I was reading the comments of a video about my new book, At Dark I Become Loathsome,
Yeah.
and someone made a particularly insightful comment about what they think the book is about, actually.
Yeah.
How it's not what it presents itself to be, but rather
Mm.
it's like a metaphor
Yeah.
for this other subject that they thought I was discussing. And that had never crossed my mind. But when they went into their analysis and kind of went through their answers of their
Mm.
evidence of like what they thought and why they came to this conclusion, I thought to myself, that's perfectly reasonable. And that's a
Yeah.
brilliant assessment. And I
Yeah.
wish I could take credit for thinking of that. But I love that stuff. I love when people come to the table with their own ideas and their own,
Mm.
notions about what I've written and come up with these analyses.
Yeah.
To me, that's just really exhilarating.
Yeah, of course. I think that's from every writer I've spoken to, it's always the feedback where it's clear that something that you've written almost unintentional, it might be you might have intended it or not, but that's something that gets deep into people. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the true communication. And your writing definitely, I mean, it has plot, but there is always, it seems to me, symbolism, is quite and quite kind of, I was saying before, there's surrealist symbolism as well, which is open
Yeah.
to interpretation. So I think whether you know it or not, you probably are intending for people to be able to stamp their own thing on it. I was wondering about though, because let's be honest, transgressive horror splatterpunk is, it's one thing to write a play for school, and
Hmm.
it's another thing to go, this stuff, which let's be honest, a lot of people I think would misunderstand, a lot of horror, not just your work in general on the extremer side of things, would
Yeah.
misunderstand the intention. So what part of you did you feel like you had to be brave in order to kind of step out and put something like that out, or were you kind of ready when the time came?
I definitely wasn't ready
Yeah.
when I published like Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke. I was not ready at all for what happened. And
Yeah.
I still feel like I'm not fully prepared for a lot of what happens behind the scenes and
Mhm.
in public
Yeah,
in
yeah.
my career. But that said, I I know I'm a resilient person
Yeah.
and I know I am brave and I know I do have courage. And I am capable of withstanding a lot.
Mm.
So to me, it's almost become maybe I wasn't ready for it, but I have what it takes to withstand it. You know what I mean?
I do actually. I was speaking to this guy, this writer, Nick Roberts, and he said that I was talking about, probably going on and on about who should write what, and is it okay if this person writes this? And he was like, the only thing is if you can take the criticism. Like,
Yeah,
and I think that's completely true. And I think that's true about life. I think if you spend too much time really overanalyzing and worrying what everyone thinks, I mean,
yeah,
obviously in your position, I think that it's difficult because there are so many voices, and
yeah.
it's not just a couple of people who are going, wait, this is a bit fucked up. It's a lot of people, but that doesn't mean that they're right, because I mean, this stuff there is no accounting for taste, and people are going to come at especially horror and splatterpunk from different points of view. Some people see it as a very nourishing thing,
Yeah.
and they will get it, and other people will go, I don't think you're doing it right. And it's like, well, we've all got very unique experiences. So looking back on that first release, like, I assume you're saying that it was a good experience overall that kind of gave you fortitude to be more brave in the future, maybe even.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm so grateful for that book and the doors it has opened for
Yeah.
me. And it's like the book that will not die. It keeps coming back and keeps coming back into my life. And people continue to talk about it. And I am just so grateful. It was an overwhelming experience. It was overstimulating for sure.
Hmm.
And like I said, I wasn't fully prepared for the the scrutiny that I was put under for a book like that. But maybe I should have been because of the content, the kind of material that I was writing. However, I didn't think a book so niche
Yeah.
would ever
Yeah.
cross over into the mainstream.
Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Oh, totally. I mean, I completely agree. I think the first ever thing I read, actually, I can't remember what the first thing I read. I think it was a short story in an anthology. I remember thinking, God, this is so like graphic and strange, and this feels like I was really drawn to it. But I was like, wow, this is like quite niche though. Like this is the
Yeah.
prose are it's poetic and it's kind of I don't quite know what's going on, but at the same time, like that kind of part of me underneath does know exactly what's going on, and I really loved it. But yeah, I think that it would be surprising for it to have been such a great success. But at the same time, do you think that, the themes that it deals with, again, I think there's like this kind of, actually, I want to talk to you about this, like relationships, because, and that's the thing, like pretty much all of your work in one form or another deals with love. And,
Mm,
and I know that you've said as well, you've spoken about this, but like how you kind of deform around other people and love, kind of changes you. And,
yeah.
is that like something like it must be something from your own life that has made you have this quite, I would say, particular grotesque view of love?
Yeah. I mean, it's I think it's interesting. Like love is so multidimensional. There are so many sides to love. It's not just one thing, but it can be grotesque, it can be vile, and it
Yeah,
can be also beautiful and rewarding and like satisfying. That said, my answer is going to be kind of boring only because my love life, like I have been with my partner for 5 years now.
yeah,
And I when we were first starting out in falling in love, it was such a beautiful and just gratifying time in my life.
yeah,
Uh, it was like the first time I had felt truly loved from someone other than my parents before.
yeah,
Um, and that to me was so, so rewarding, and so unique. For a long time, I really didn't think I was worthy of being loved. I didn't think that I was someone who would ever find
yeah,
companionship in anybody. So when I met my partner, everything kind of just fell into place, and it was just beautiful. I mean, there's no other word to
yeah,
describe it. Just
yeah.
absolutely so refreshing
That's
and
lovely.
wonderful to be cherished by someone. But that said, I am a horror writer by nature, and horror writers are worst case scenario specialists.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So I constantly am worried. I'm constantly anxious. I constantly find myself wondering, perseverating on things, um, worrying about love, about how I stand with my partner, about where I kind of fit into his life, how he fits into mine. Um, and I remember there was one story I wrote at the beginning of our relationship called The Trees Grew Because I Bled There,
yeah,
which is in my collection of the same title. And that whole story is about what do you do when you love someone more than they love you?
yeah.
you know
I do.
and
Yeah.
that was something that really just crawled around in my mind for a very long time at the
Mm.
beginning of our relationship,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because the beginning of any relationship is always so fraught and always so unsure. You don't know, at least in my experience, you don't know if you can fully trust that person. You don't know if you should let yourself fully, you know, let them fully into you, let you fully into them. It's a difficult time for certain, and I found myself really worried about these things, and
Yeah,
I felt like the only way to kind of dissect what I was feeling was to put it in a story and really reflect on it, and talk about a situation where a partner loves another person more than they can ever be loved in return.
yeah,
Um, and to me, that felt very special to what I was going through at that time. Now, of course, years later, I don't really find myself racked with those feelings
yeah,
anymore. I don't find myself filled with them anymore. But of course, new issues arise in any relationship, and there's turbulence,
yeah,
there's turmoil, and it does provide for interesting stories,
yeah. Of course
where
it
you
does.
can draw from. But for the most part, um, my real world view of love is that it is something beautiful and something to be cherished. But I think what I write about, it's almost like an exorcism. It's almost like a way of purging all
Yeah.
of the darkness and all of the monstrosities I feel about love in my writing, you know?
Yeah, I do. And I actually, I wasn't insinuating that it was like I was taking everything as like literal, that these are all kind of like real experiences that you'd have.
Yeah, yeah,
But I
yeah.
mean, I get it that they are kind of these kind of, yeah, like they're kind of cancerous worries that come
Yeah.
when you are like, because it's very scary to fall in love with someone, and there is an instinct to kind of go, I don't want to need you like that, you know, like
Yeah.
as well,
Yeah.
like because I've been married nearly for, well, no, I've not been married, but I've been with my partner for 10 years,
Wow.
and I have noticed that the more we're together, the more I think about death, and the more I think about, oh my god, all of this love and loveliness is going to be turned into something absolutely horrible for at least for one of us, you know. And like,
Yeah.
and I don't want to like, I don't like living in that, you know. It's not like something I'm like going away and thinking about all the time, but it's funny how that changed at the beginning for me, from being like, oh, I don't know, are we seeing each other too much, are we, you know, should I come over to yours, you should, you know, and then eventually
Yeah.
you see it come into this thing where it's like, I think you're right, there's always, it does change, it transforms, and there is always some kind of like kind of crazy tension in yourself when you love someone.
There's always like a level of uncertainty with
Yeah,
love, it
yeah,
feels like. You know, how it, and love that what you're describing, it's like that worry kind of mutates.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
it starts off as one thing, and then over the course, as the dynamics sort of shift, other worries come into play. And I definitely find myself thinking about my own mortality a lot.
yeah,
Now that I've been with my partner for 5 years, um I worry about the same things, like one of us passing away and then leaving the other behind. Like,
yeah.
you know,
It's
it's
honestly dreadful.
inevitable.
It's
Yeah.
inevitable, but that's what's crazy about it. Is it's like, you know, you're kind of making this pact, and it's like someone is going to really suffer as a consequence of it. And obviously it's not something that you should be carrying around day to day, like you shouldn't, you know, obviously these feelings, they're not things you want to think about. But then at the same time, and this is, I think, like the important thing about horror, is that if you don't acknowledge those things, if you pretend they're not there, they're gonna hit you like a train. Like they might even
Yeah.
kill you. It might even kill you if you haven't even thought about and thought about all that darkness in you. If you haven't explored it enough, you it might really ruin you, I think. And so I use horror as a kind of way to cope with these things. As I'm sure you do as a writer and a reader as well.
I do the same thing. I really find myself drawn to the darkness,
Yeah,
just so that I don't repel it, so that I don't push it away too much, because I feel like when you push
yeah,
something away to a point where you want it completely out of your sight, that's when it kind of digs its hooks into you and
yeah.
draws you in further.
Your titles are unusual, and they seem to be, they have like almost a unique rhythm to them, almost. Like, do they occur to you during the process? Is it something that you write, or is it, do you, you know, do you sit back and kind of, does it come to you afterwards? What's the process?
I'm quite ritualistic when I approach any sort of creative project, and
Yeah.
I'm a little superstitious, so I can't really begin working in earnest on a project until I have a title in my head. And it doesn't even have to be the title that ends up on the front of the book cover. Um, it just has to be something that I feel proud of and that I feel like works with the material and what, like, the vibes I'm trying to convey. Um, yeah, I mean, it's kind of different for every book, just how the title sort of works its way into my head. But a lot of times I'm doing something as innocuous as like cleaning the dishes or,
Yeah.
uh, you know, doing the laundry or making the bed. Um, and a phrase or just a couple of words will just kind of creep into my mind, and I'll think to myself, oh, that's an interesting, you know,
Yeah.
sentence, or could be like a title, and I'll get my phone and I'll just type it, you know, type it down. I have a file on my phone that's just endless,
Endless
like
time.
possible titles. Um, and so the creation of the title is separate from the creation of like the plot and the
Yeah.
what I want to write about. Um, but they kind of meet sort of in the middle when
Mm.
I'm gestating and when I'm like uh creating like the world of what I want this book to be.
Yeah.
Um,
No.
like At Dark I Become Loathsome, that book went through a few different titles in the very early stages. But it wasn't until I hit that phrase, At Dark I Become Loathsome, while I was writing,
Mm.
that I was like, ooh, that's the title, that's the refrain that I want to keep hammering
Yes.
people with throughout the book.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Almost like, you could kind of see the narrator going mad while he was telling you the story. So it's like I said, it's kind of a different approach. But there is no right way to any of
No.
this. There's no correct way to do
No.
anything in writing. And I'm always leery of people who give
Yes.
writing advice and say like, oh, it has to be this way. You have to do this and then this. Like it's bullshit. Like none of it matters
Yeah.
and none of it's real.
No, it's
Um,
true. There is something as well, fantastically like oblique about, I think, any form of creativity when you kind of, because obviously you want to go through the process of going, well, how do I do it? And it's
mhm.
really tempting to you gravitate towards, I want to copy people and all of that. And but
Yeah,
when you, I think the process that you described when I use the word oblique, I think I mean like it may not be like you've got some books where it's like the title pretty much tells you exactly what's going to happen in the book, and your
yeah,
titles, they're more a mood, and it's more
yeah,
like kind of, well, the title is probably going to frame how you read this,
yeah,
in one way or
totally.
another, even if it doesn't seem completely kind of obvious why. And I think that the connection is probably going to help, like when you said you saw that YouTube comment where it's like, wow, that's a really astute kind of analysis that I would never have come up with. I think that kind of stuff, you're obviously giving some air for people to kind of leave their own mark.
I do want to give people space. Like I want to give readers the freedom to interpret my work
Yeah.
as freely as possible. Um, I don't think I'm an authority on anything I'm writing because I wrote it.
Yeah.
I feel I have a relationship with these readers now. Like there's a symbiotic relationship between the reader and writer. Um, and I want to honor that. If people come up to me and say, this book I felt was about XYZ, I love that and I want to honor that.
Yeah.
I don't feel precious or attached to any. I'm not trying to be didactic when I sit down and write something.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of my books start off as a mood. A lot of my
Mm.
books start off as like a vibe,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I love that. Like I'm very influenced by filmmakers like David Lynch,
Yeah.
who kind of mastered the whole art of the vibe and
Yeah.
like the mood of a film and how it interacts with the audience. And the audience may not understand everything, but
No.
that's okay. You don't have to.
No.
I love stuff like that.
Oh, so do I. And I think because it's, there's a place for everything, but I think particularly this type, and I think transgressive horror often works on this level where it leaves a mark on you that you're not quite aware of while you're reading, and definitely not when you finish. And actually you might not even realize it for a bit afterwards. But it just stays in you. And like when we talk about like Kathy Koja, like I definitely have got that from her writing, whereas like, wow, that is just stamped in my head somewhere now. And
Yeah.
it's not like, oh, the plot, that twist, oof, that twist was amazing. It's a vibe. And that's
Total
that's
vibe.
yeah, exactly. And that's the aim. And let's talk about what you're working on now. Like, and are you I wait, first, are you someone who's writing like all the time and just like
Yes.
that's your life? Like,
Constantly writing. I'm always creating. I My agent gets frustrated with me and kind of tells me I need to like sit on my hands more and not write so much because I'm
no.
so prolific.
Yeah.
And I have books kind of scheduled out for the next 3, 4 years.
Whoa.
So I mean, these are books that I wrote. I mean, one that's coming out next year, I wrote relatively recently, and which the way my schedule kind of worked out, we were able to kind of slide it in sooner,
Yeah, yeah.
which I'm really grateful for that. That's the book that's called Wretch. That's going to be with Saga and Simon and Schuster.
Amazing.
So I'm really looking forward to that. But yeah, I'm somebody who is always creating. I'm always excited about what I'm going to write next.
Yeah.
I finished a novella recently that I'm really proud of. That is just total vibes. It's total
Yeah.
like mood, like very bleak, very grim.
Mm.
Uh but yeah, I mean I love this so much. I mean, there's never been a point where I've thought I should walk away from this and just
No.
stop publishing. Like, to me, this is just part of me now. It
Yeah.
feels like so innate. It
Yeah.
feels like something I always just it's something that I always dreamed of doing.
Yeah.
And to be able to have the platform that I do now and the freedom to express myself and my art the way that I want to with
Yeah.
very little censorship
No.
uh
No. No.
is it's fabulous. Like
No,
it's
it's
wonderful.
amazing. It sounds
Yeah.
so lovely, and I think yeah, just being able to kind of open up that portal in your heart to just mainline what it is you enjoy doing is so epic. And do you have like if you write that much, yeah, do you have some stuff that you've written and completed that you're like that's never going,
Yes.
that's good, but nah,
Yep. I have a lot of
yeah,
material like on my hard drive that I will never publish.
yeah,
Um just because some of it just isn't ready for prime time. Like, it's just not ready for
yeah,
publishing. And then others I kind of lost attachment
mm,
to, and I wouldn't know how to get up on a stage and talk about it in front of
yes,
people. I mean, whether it's because it makes me uncomfortable or whether it's because I've just kind of fallen out of love with it since it's been so long since I first wrote it, which is unfortunate. But I mean, that's what happens. Publishing kind of moves at this glacial pace,
yeah,
and you write something in 2023, it may not be out until 2025 or 2026.
yeah,
Um, so that in and of itself is unfortunate. But yeah, there's tons of projects that I don't think I'll ever publish. But a lot of those projects I'll scavenge
yeah,
from,
of course,
and
yeah.
I'll pull things from those other projects and kind of drag them into the same stew pot that I'm
Mm,
working on with like my current project. And
mm,
that's why it's important to never like delete your drafts,
yeah,
never get rid of anything, like any sort of notes, or if you do like longhand notes, like I do sometimes, not often, but I do occasionally do like longhand notes in like a journal. Always keep that. Like, always
yeah,
keep that as
yeah.
like a reference point. I struggle to throw anything away just because I might need it eventually.
Yeah, of course. And I think that there's a problem with some with for a lot of people is this issue of putting work out there and they want it to be really good and they want it to be as the best it can possibly be, which is valid. But you if you put all of your eggs in one basket, I think
Hmm.
it actually kind of yeah, it just restricts you and like keeping on just I guess like for you, you must be writing is constantly a learning process of
It is, and art is inherently flawed. Art is
yeah,
not perfect. Nothing is ever going to be perfect. And
no,
once you kind of come to terms with that, at least for me, it was very freeing because I thought there are no rules to any of this. Nothing's ever going to be completely perfect.
mm,
Um, we can labor over a draft, my editor and I, for months. We can go through the proofreader. We can go through the copy editor, and like that book will come out and
yeah,
there will still be a misprint on page 227.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's inevitable.
No,
It
it
just
is.
I mean, you have to do everything in your power to keep yourself sharp and edit and write with accuracy, but don't hold yourself to some impossible standard that
Yeah.
what you write is never going to be good enough to see the light of day.
No, and it's a good well metaphor, whatever, for just being a person as well. I mean,
Yeah,
it is
exactly.
it is good to embrace. I love embracing the flaws. I mean, you are only really until you embrace the flaws do you actually kind of get to move on, if anything.
Exactly.
Let's talk about the craft as well, like because so now and you have been for some time, a successful writer with an audience. What you've got I presume, like you say, you get a huge amount of enjoyment out of that initial spark of an idea, the vibe, the writing, that first draft, which is difficult as well, I'm sure. But like, what point does it get hard for you? Like, is the editing hard, or is it enjoyable, or a mixture? What's the vibe?
Guess it varies project to project. I mean, sometimes a certain draft, I'll write a draft and maybe the characterization is off.
Yeah.
Maybe like I didn't develop a certain character as well as I could have.
Mm,
And it becomes a process of how do I strengthen this? How do I build this out more? How do I make this the best it can be? And sometimes my editor doesn't have easy answers for any of that.
mm,
And then it's left up to me to decide, well, how do I move forward with this?
yeah.
And it's quite intense a lot of the time, like, you know, going into a project, maybe not having all of the answers laid out in front of you, but knowing you have a deadline to meet.
Yeah.
That in and of itself is a challenge. But it's never to the point of uh like destabilizing. You
No.
know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's
you're
never
not
to the
going,
point.
oh fuck it, I can't do this, you know.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
never to the point where I get overwhelmed and like I can't do this. I don't want to do this anymore. Like to me, those challenges are really excellent opportunities for creativity
Yeah, yeah.
and for like discovering parts of myself that I didn't know existed until now. Um,
Definitely.
like that is the best part. It's one of the most challenging parts of the process, but also like the most rewarding part of the
Mm,
process is going into that draft and knowing there are a lot of issues here. I have to clean all of this up. I have to strengthen this character. I have to make it so that this makes sense in chapter 9. How can I foreshadow
yeah,
it in
yeah,
chapter 2 or 3?
yeah, yeah.
That is difficult, but it's also like really gratifying at the same time.
Yeah, and because also the it's a creative problem, and the answer's there. You kind of know like the ingredients to solve the problem is you,
Yeah.
so it's really
I'm better with problems on the page than I am with problems in the real
that's probably
world.
why you write so much.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just more comfortable like solving these problems than I am
Well,
any other problems in my life.
but I think that is probably quite an interesting point there, because it's like really, I think for me a lot of the problems in outside in the world, there I feel like there are problems imposed upon me by other things that I can't control. Whereas I think when you have a controlled environment of any kind of creative kind, it's like it's a way of like feeling in control. And I don't
Mhm.
mean being a control freak. I just mean like going like, yes, I can get past this. I have the resilience to work this out. I created this thing and I'm gonna see it through to the end. And I think that's yeah, it's a wonderful thing to do. I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I do want to ask you about the things that as a horror writer, the things that scare you and why you like being scared. I mean, we kind of touched on it a little bit before, but if you could just build on it a little bit, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean it kind of echoes what you were just saying about the controlled environment
Yeah.
of writing and the creative process and how maybe real world problems uh different than solving problems in this creative space where it's like kind of controlled and you feel a little bit safer.
Mm.
Um, Same sort of thing with horror. I was always an anxious,
Yeah.
upset person. The whole world just frightened me
Mm.
constantly when I was little, and it still does to this
Yeah.
day. Like a lot of things like really unsettle me. Just in the news, I don't
Oh,
watch the news a
no,
lot,
no, no.
just because it's too upsetting.
That's the real. I mean, that's the real horror piped into everyone's houses every day in
Yeah,
their phones. Like it's mad. Yeah.
yeah, it's just really unnerving. So I find myself looking toward horror fiction and horror films as this safe, controlled area where I can uh, like interact with my anxieties and my concerns. But at the end of it, the book's gonna end, the credits are
Mm.
gonna roll, and I'm gonna be safe.
Yeah.
That to me is so much better than the real world equivalent of all of these problems, these crises across the world that I feel I'm completely powerless
Yeah.
over. Um, in horror fiction, especially when I'm writing horror fiction, I feel like I control the anxiety and I control the worry. Um, and more to the point, I've always been fearful of other people. That's why so many of my books revolve around human beings doing awful things
Yeah,
to one another.
cruelty and brutality. Yeah,
Human cruelty and human
yeah,
brutality. And I find myself really scared of other people
yeah,
because of that. There when I think of publishing a book and making people uncomfortable with my fiction,
yeah,
it almost feels like I take a little bit of power back that
yeah,
I've
yeah.
given away.
I get
It
it.
feels powerful
Yeah,
to put my book into the hands of someone else and say, all right, now you be scared. You be uncomfortable. You be unnerved by this. It's
yeah,
something that I created. It
yeah,
feels like there's a level of power there that's really exciting for me, just as a writer and
yeah.
as a human being.
What about rage? Like, do you? Because I would say that your writing is visceral and it's disgusting, but in a very like human way. You know, like it's like I feel like the body horror often feels like very rooted in like actual body stuff. Like it's
Yes.
not some like crazy kind of sci-fi vibe, but like there it seems though to be this kind of anger there as
Yeah.
well. Like, and how are you dealing with like angry feelings in your like life? Or like, is that a place where it's like, is it
I
easier
definitely
to?
write. Yeah, I write from that as well. I'm very angry at the state of the world that we're living in right now. The timeline that we're in is like not my favorite.
No, it's
Um,
terrible. Yeah,
I mean the awful anti-trans movement,
yeah,
the anti-LGBTQ plus, just in general,
mm,
it's despicable. It's
mm,
awful.
yeah,
Um, and I feel so much sadness. I feel very powerless,
yeah,
and it fills me with fury. And I try to write from that wellspring
yeah,
a lot. Um, it feels like really the only thing I can control lately.
yeah.
The only thing I can kind of like do. And I don't even think that writing books is like helping people, but it's maybe offering them an outlet.
No,
It's maybe offering them a little bit of entertainment.
it's definitely helping people. I know, like recently I read another one of Gretchen Felker Martin's books. And
Love
like
her.
that's just for me, as soon as I finished it, I was like, I feel like I need to talk to Gretchen and I need to go like, oh, thank you. Like you've just let me let go of some feelings that I can't myself express. And I think it's the same as yours. Like I feel because a lot of your writing as well, like Gretchen Felker Martin's is quite kind of like big and like and like big concept kind of things. And yours there is high concept in there, but there's an intimacy in yours. It's a
Yeah.
it's a claustrophobic intimacy, which I
Yep.
think also works with it because like with the things you just said, just the way that we're still having to deal with the ignorance is so isolating. And
Mhm.
I think that the way that you explore it is really interesting, and that's why I wanted to bring up that anger because when I read your work, it makes me sad and a bit angry, but not in a bad way. Like
Thank
in
you.
a way that makes me go like, oh, I couldn't have accessed that in the way,
And that you feel maybe less alone, like someone else
yeah,
feels this too. And I think that's what horror really does so exceptionally
yeah,
well is it really does bring people together who are marginalized and who feel disenfranchised. And you think to yourself, oh, like there are other people like me out there who are thought of as weirdos,
mm,
but we're not. Like
no,
we're fine. We're gonna
no.
be fine.
We may be the majority in some ways. Like,
Exactly.
there's so many people who feel like outsiders, but they mask to get
Yeah,
through it. And I think that we are quite lucky to have that perfect condition to have been weird, but then also find an outlet and not be crushed down and molded into
totally.
some kind of horrible straight-jacketed life. But I think that's a good place. I want to ask before we finish the so is Wretch the next work coming out, or what's the next book that's being published?
So Yeah, the next book that's going to be published is We Are Always Tender with Our Dead, which comes out September 9th. Um,
Amazing.
it's the first installment of my Burnt Sparrow trilogy of
Wow.
books.
Yeah.
So it's going to be 3 volumes, all set in this fictional town in New Hampshire, that kind of chronicles the decay and the degeneration of this small community after a horrible massacre that occurs on Christmas Day in 2003.
Wow.
And the whole series goes over the span of several decades and kind of chronicles this town's horrible downfall.
Oh, that sounds epic. That sounds great. Okay, September 9th. Fantastic. And I'd like to ask, what are you reading at the moment? Are you on anything good?
Ooh, I'm reading a collection of stories right now. I've been reading some novels, but I'm switching over to collections right now just because I want some short fiction I
Yeah,
can
yeah.
kind of like,
Variety and
enjoy.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
variety.
Yeah.
There's an author named Maria Fernanda Ampuero.
Yeah.
And she wrote a book called Human Sacrifices
Yeah, yeah,
a
yeah.
few years ago that
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was fortunate enough to blurb, and brutal and just
Yeah.
so unsettling,
Yeah.
wonderful. Brilliant, brilliant book. So I bought her, I think her first book that was published in English, by the Feminist Press. It's called Cockfight,
Yeah.
and it's a short story collection as well. The writing is just stunning. The stories are so bizarre and so
Yeah.
bleak and grim,
Yeah.
and just everything I love in short fiction. Very, like almost like a more transgressive, more unflinching Mariana Enriquez,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
would
yeah.
describe it as.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I love Mariana Enriquez with my whole heart. Like I love
Yeah,
everything
yeah, yeah. No,
that woman
it's a
writes.
spectrum of delight, horror. Like,
Yeah,
anyway, I just want to, do you ever get like writing envy where you read other people's writing and you go, oh my God, they're so good. Like,
yeah, with Mariana Enriquez.
yeah.
With her especially, I love everything that woman has written. So
Yeah.
I definitely get writer's envy for
Yeah, I
sure.
mean, it's a compliment at the end of the day. And finally, what do you watch TV?
I do watch TV.
What are you
Yeah.
watching? Do you dip around, or are you hooked on something at the moment?
I'm kind of boring. I watch a lot of Golden Girls. I
Ah, it's
watch a
not
lot of
boring.
like the Golden Girls. I watch like Bob's Burgers. I
Yeah,
watch like happy stuff because so much of
yeah,
what I write and so much of what I read
yeah.
is like unpleasant and like disturbing,
Yes.
that I need some sort of outlet
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
for like being joyful and cheerful. So
yeah.
TV time, limited as it may be, like I need it to be like a little bit mindless, you
Oh, totally.
know?
I watch like reality TV, so I'm not.
Okay, so you get
No, I'm not.
it.
I'm not. I'm not highbrow in my tastes. And it's the same. It's become really the same in films now. Like I kind of, as much as I love film as well, and it's
Yeah,
a whole art form, but I also kind of just sometimes just give me that straight, just fire down like those basic emotions into my face.
yeah.
I'm happy. But yeah, thank you so much for.
This was lovely.
No, it
Thank you so
was so
much.
lovely, and I'd love to do it again when you've released something and your next work. Maybe after you've released, what was it called? Another great title. The
Um,
Feminist
we
September.
are we are always tender with our dead.
We are always tender with our dead. Okay, amazing. Yeah, maybe after once that's released, we could talk again.
I
Um,
would love that.
but yeah, what are you doing for the rest of the day? Are you
I have a few like calls I have to make, like to my agent, and just like I want to get some writing down. I haven't written yet today,
do you
so
write on the weekends as well? Like, are you like
I do actually.
so you're like a proper like every day at the desk?
I take some days off. Some days like it just doesn't hit, and I'm
It's not
just like,
vibing. Yeah.
I'm not vibing with any of this, so I'll just like put it down. But then like if I do that, I kind of hold myself to this really horrible standard. And I know I told people not to be like this and hold yourself to impossible standards, but I hold myself to impossible standards. And I'm
Oh,
like, oh, should you should really write more today. So,
no, I
it just
know.
it varies.
I
But
know, but like you love it, so it's okay. Like it's
I
coming from a
love
good
it.
place.
Yeah, I
It's
love
not
it.
coming from a like you're if you don't do it then you're shit. That's not you're
Yeah, right.
you enjoy it. But
I'm
yeah,
just like very militant. Yeah.
yeah, no. I get it. I totally get it. But yeah, thank you so much. I will. So basically, yeah, I kind of share this TikTok, Instagram kind of stuff, and So I know you don't have TikTok. It's probably for the best. It does suck time out of life. But
Yeah.
I'll send it to you when it's done.
Yes, please
I will.
do.
I will.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I will see you when I see you. I've got your email, so I'll drop you a line at some point.
Yes, please do.
All
Thank you
right.
so much again.
Thank.
Really appreciate
No,
it.
I really appreciate it too. Thanks, Eric. All right. See you, man.
Bye.